Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We begin today with Vice President Mike Pence. Welcome, and so good to have you here.
Yeah, morning, Margaret.
You arrived here today with Secret Service agents who are with you 24 hours a day.
Right.
Are they getting paid during this shutdown?
They're not at this point, and 800,000 federal workers are also going without pay, and if we don't have a resolution, then those paychecks won't go out at the end of this week. But we also have a crisis at our southern border, Margaret, humanitarian and a security crisis. And as the president laid out yesterday, we're absolutely determined to secure the border, to end the shutdown. And what the president articulated yesterday was a good faith, common sense compromise, where the president laid out his priorities, building a physical barrier on the southern border, a steel barrier, new resources for border patrol, humanitarian assistance technology. But the president also announced that he'd be willing to support legislation that provides temporary relief, 3 years of temporary legal status for those in the DACA program and also those who have temporary protective status. It really is an effort to compromise, and we really look forward to the Senate taking this bill up Tuesday and beginning to work in earnest, not just to end this government shutdown, which is a burden on the families of 800,000 federal workers, but even more importantly in that, to address the crisis that we face at our southern border.
If this is a genuine attempt, why weren't any Democrats included in the consultations for this?
Well, Margaret, we've been talking to Democrats.
Who?
Over the last 4 weeks. Well, first, the president's met repeatedly with Democrat leadership all the way through a week ago last Wednesday.
But Democratic leadership says this is a non-starter.
Well, look, that meeting in the Situation Room a week ago Wednesday, the president looked at Speaker Pelosi and said, okay, if I gave you everything you wanted, if I signed legislation for funding most of the government, and had a 30-day extension on Homeland Security. He said to her, I was sitting there, he said, would you give me funding to secure the border and a wall? And she said no. So what the president directed us to do, our negotiation team, was to reach out with rank and file Democrats in the House and in the Senate. And what the president presented yesterday really is an effort to bring together ideas from both political parties. I think it is an act of statesmanship on the president's part to say, here is what I'm for. It includes my priorities. It includes priorities that Democrats have advanced for some period of time. And we believe it provides a framework for ending this impasse, securing our border and reopening government.
I didn't hear you say which Democrats are supporting it, though.
Right.
And you need that.
Well, the president met this week, we all did, with the Problem Solvers Caucus. I think we all know who was there, and we were grateful for their presence. But we've had good conversations with Democrat members of the Senate. But look, their leadership has discouraged them in the House and the Senate from engaging the administration, so I want to respect those conversations. But I think what the American people saw the president do yesterday was say, I want to set the table for us resolving this issue in a way that achieves his objectives to secure the border, end the humanitarian and security crisis, end the government shutdown, but also to bring together the Democrats' priorities to accomplish that. That's what the American people expect us to do. And honestly, the hearts and minds of the American people today are thinking a lot about it being the weekend where we remember the life and work of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. King was, now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. You think of how he changed America. He inspired us to change through the legislative process to become a more perfect union. That's exactly what President Trump is calling on the Congress to do. Come to the table in a spirit of good faith. We'll secure our border, we'll reopen the government, and we'll move our nation forward, as the president said yesterday, to even a broader discussion about immigration reform in the months ahead.
You've said that this offer on the table is not amnesty. The president this morning tweeted something that I'd like you to clarify, though. He said, amnesty will be used on a much bigger deal, whether on immigration or something else. Was that an offer for a path to citizenship?
Well, I'll let the president's words stand. But
do you know what he meant?
Yes, I do.
What was it?
At the end of his remarks yesterday, he made it very clear that while this proposal is it's funding to secure our border, to build a steel barrier on the southern border, to give additional resources that the Department of Homeland Security has requested in terms of personnel and facilities and detection technologies, as well as humanitarian assistance. But the President's also said he's more than willing, in this legislation that comes to the floor of the Senate on Tuesday, to extend temporary relief to people that are in the TPS program as well as the DACA program. But at the end of that speech, I hope the American people heard him. So once we move past this impasse, once we begin to build more trust between the parties, this is a president who's absolutely determined to fix our broken immigration system in this country. But he has always said it all begins with border security.
Will he come down from that $5.7 billion ask? Is that also up for negotiation?
Well, look, that's the president's request, and the Senate leadership has agreed to bring the bill to the floor with our request for funding for the wall and all the other resources. But look, we recognize the legislative process is a process of give and take. The Democrats want to bring amendments or recommendations forward. I know the president will give them due consideration, but the president is absolutely determined to build a steel barrier on the southern border in the 10 priority areas that the Department of Homeland Security said that we need a physical barrier. It's roughly 234 miles. It's not from sea to sea. It's 234 miles of additional steel barrier. And frankly, you look back at prior administrations, virtually the last 4 presidents have all built similar barriers on the southern border, including President Obama. And we just want to respond to the needs that we have to secure our border. But once the legislative process goes forward, I know President Trump will be listening to recommendations from the other party.
There was an Inspector General report this week that said that the Trump administration actually separated far more children from their parents than initially reported, more than the 2,700. In fact, they couldn't put a figure on it. Do you regret that policy? Well,
the president reversed that policy. And now we have in place.
But do you regret what happened to the more than 2,700 children and parents?
I think we regret not only that circumstance, but what's driving that circumstance. It's one of the reasons why the president had Secretary Nielsen negotiate with Mexico that going forward, we'll be able to allow families to remain in Mexico while they apply for asylum. And it would obviate the need to bring them into our system that is ill-equipped to handle the extraordinary influx of families and unaccompanied minors that's coming across our border today. A majority of the 60,000 people that are detained attempting to come into our country illegally every single month, more than 2,000 a day, are now families and unaccompanied children. We now have an arrangement with Mexico where those families can remain in Mexico. The president in his proposal also recommended that we allow children to apply for asylum in the Central American countries. Look, the human traffickers and the cartels take American cash to entice families to send either their family or their children on the long and dangerous journey north. We want that to end. These reforms will advance that from ending. But look, it's time for Congress to come to the table.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I do want to ask you two quick things, since it's so rare we get time with you. Do you care to comment on this BuzzFeed report that the special counsel seemed to have found some issue with, but wasn't specific? What part of this report was inaccurate?
Well, the special counsel said that the report of BuzzFeed was inaccurate, and frankly, the response by many in the national media to take it at face value and engage.
Well, what part of it was wrong?
In hyperventilating about accusations against the president was really a disgrace. Look.
But you don't know which part of it was inaccurate.
There is an obsession in this town. Look, we've fully cooperated with the special counsel. Over 1 million documents. We'll continue to fully cooperate. I'll let the special counsel address that issue. The president has maintained that he did nothing wrong. But look, what the American people saw this week was the obsession of many in the national media, and frankly, some Democrats on Capitol Hill, to assume the worst about this president.
Well, that's why I wanted you to.
And frankly, we appreciate the special counsel.
Was inaccurate.
We appreciate the special counsel making it clear that that report was inaccurate.
Noted.
And look, the special counsel is going to complete his work, and we're going to continue to focus on the issues that are most important to the American people.
Very quickly, 4 Americans were killed in a suicide attack in Syria this week. That same day, you gave a speech and said the ISIS caliphate was defeated. Do you regret, in hindsight, saying that?
Well, first and foremost...
Their deaths seem to contradict what you said.
Well, look, first and foremost, we're deeply saddened at the loss of these 4 brave Americans. And we were praying, especially yesterday, when the President joined their families at Dover Air Force Base. I mean, their contributions to our national security will forever be enshrined in the hearts of the American people. But look, President Obama withdrew American forces
should you have
from
said that?
Iraq. Well, let me be clear. President Obama withdrew American forces from Iraq precipitously in 2011. ISIS rose up virtually out of the desert,
And that's the
overran
criticism
vast
of what the
areas
Trump
of Iraq and
administration's doing in
Syria.
Syria now.
President Obama began a bombing campaign, but when we came into office 2 years ago today, President Trump said we are going to drive ISIS out of Iraq, we're going to drive the caliphate out of existence. And because of the sacrifices and the courage of people like those 4 brave Americans, the end of 2017, we captured the so-called capital of their caliphate in Raqqa. The ISIS state has been defeated. But as I said in that very same speech, the president wants to bring our troops home, but he also wants to make sure that we hand off the fight against ISIS in Syria, what remains of ISIS in Syria, to our coalition partners, and that we continue to support them with American assets in the region. The ISIS caliphate has crumbled thanks to the courage of our armed forces and our allies in the region. But America is going to continue to support the effort until we drive any remnants of ISIS from the region and from the face of the earth.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Margaret.